I often find myself reflecting on the tragic tale of Charles Dexter Ward, a young man whose life spiraled into darkness and despair, driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge. His story is not just one of a cursed family lineage, but also a cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession and the perils of delving too deep into the shadows of history. I first learned of Ward while I was researching the haunted histories of Providence, Rhode Island. There was something compelling about the whispers that surrounded his name, the unsettling tales of his ancestor, Joseph Curwen, who had walked the earth in the 17th century. Curwen was not merely a man, but a figure cloaked in infamy, an alchemist and sorcerer, rumored to have dabbled in necromancy and other unspeakable arts. It was this dark legacy that would ensnare Charles, leading him down a path from which there was no return. From an early age, Charles Dexter Ward exhibited a curiosity that set him apart from his peers. Born in 1898 to a well-to-do family, he was bright, inquisitive, and deeply interested in the arcane. His fascination with the mysteries of his ancestry became an all-consuming passion that would ultimately consume him. I remember vividly the tales of how Charles stumbled upon the secret of his lineage. One day, while exploring the dusty corners of his family's estate, he discovered a dusty portrait of Joseph Curwen. The man in the painting seemed to gaze through the canvas, his eyes filled with secrets. It was in that moment, I imagine, that Ward's obsession ignited, setting him on a course toward madness. Charles's interest in Curwen was not merely casual, it was a fiery curiosity that quickly transformed into an all-consuming obsession. As he grew older, he immersed himself in the dark history of Curwen, devouring every scrap of information he could find. He pored over ancient texts and obscure manuscripts, drawn to the sinister details of his ancestors' life. It was a life shrouded in mystery and dread, filled with stories of human sacrifice and the pursuit of immortality. The deeper he delved, the more the lines between his reality and Curwen's blurred. I remember the stories told by his friends and family about how he would spend nights locked away in his room, poring over dusty tomes, his eyes wide with an unnatural gleam. It was said that he had even ventured into the old decrepit house that Curwen had once called home. The townsfolk regarded that place with an air of superstition, and warnings were uttered in hushed tones about the dangers that lay within. Ward's family grew increasingly concerned as he became more reclusive. His mother often remarked on how he had changed, how the light that once sparkled in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by a haunted look that seemed to carry the weight of his ancestors' sins. But Charles, deaf to their worries, continued his research, driven by an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. It was during one of these late-night explorations that he came across an ancient book, bound in dark leather and inscribed with strange symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. This book was unlike any other he had encountered. It exuded an aura of foreboding that both terrified and fascinated him. As he read through its pages, he discovered the secrets of Curwen's dark arts, the methods of summoning and communicating with the dead, the rituals that twisted the natural order of life and death. The more he read, the more he felt an insidious connection to Curwen's legacy, a beckoning call that promised power and understanding, but threatened to pull him into an abyss from which there would be no return. I remember the fateful day when Charles first ventured into Curwen's old house, a decrepit structure shrouded in shadows and decay. The very air around it felt charged with dread, as if the house itself were alive, holding its breath in anticipation of his arrival. The townsfolk had long whispered that Curwen's spirit still lingered there, guarding the dark secrets buried within its walls. As he stepped inside, the floor creaked ominously beneath him, and a chill settled into his bones. Cobwebs hung from the rafters, and the air was thick with the musty scent of rot and disuse. It was as if the house were a living entity, pulsating with the echoes of its dark past. He could almost hear the whispers of the damned caught between this world and the next, urging him to turn back. But the allure of Curwen's secrets was too strong. He roamed from room to room, each more foreboding than the last, until he stumbled upon an attic filled with dusty relics of a time long past. It was here that he uncovered the journals of Joseph Curwen, manuscripts filled with detailed accounts of his grotesque experiments. The words leapt off the pages, igniting a fire of ambition within Charles that he could neither quench nor control. As I reflect on this, I can only imagine the fever that gripped Charles as he absorbed Curwen's knowledge. He began to conduct his own experiments, his mind consumed by visions of power and immortality. He meticulously recreated the rituals he had read about, drawing sigils and symbols on the floor of his room, lost in a world where reality and nightmare intertwined. I recall how his friends, once eager to join him in his pursuits, began to grow uneasy. They would come to visit, but each time they left with a sense of foreboding that lingered long after they departed. They witnessed his gradual transformation, how he became a hollow shell of his former self, driven by an obsession that seemed to consume him from within. It was said that they could hear him murmuring incantations late into the night, a cacophony of desperate whispers rising like a fog around him. As he pushed the boundaries of his sanity, Charles started experiencing visions, nightmares that seeped into his waking life. I can only describe these visions as horrific. They were filled with grotesque figures and dark shapes that slithered in the corners of his mind. I imagine he saw shadows that danced in the flickering candlelight, forming into ghastly faces that bore witness to the horrors he was trying to uncover. The culmination of his madness came when he attempted to summon the spirit of his ancestor, hoping to unlock the ultimate secrets of Curwen's dark arts. It was a night steeped in dread, the air thick with tension as he lit the candles and arranged the necessary symbols. I can almost feel the chill that must have crept over him as he recited the incantations, his voice trembling as the shadows deepened around him. The moment he invoked Curwen's name, the air grew heavy, charged with an unearthly energy. For a fleeting second, I believe he felt a connection to something greater than himself, a surge of power that coursed through his veins. But in that moment of triumph, the darkness surged forth, twisting his intentions into something grotesque and terrifying. The entity he had summoned was not the benevolent spirit of his ancestor, but a malevolent force that clawed at the edges of his sanity. I can hear the echoes of his screams as the air around him shimmered with dread, as shadows writhed and twisted, forming a shape that loomed over him. It was a creature born from the depths of his fears, a reflection of his own madness. In that harrowing moment, Charles realized the true cost of his obsession. The darkness he had sought to control was now consuming him, tearing at the fragile fabric of his reality. He became a prisoner of the very forces he had sought to command, trapped in a nightmare of his own making. I can only imagine the despair that gripped him as he fought against the tide of darkness, desperately trying to reclaim his sanity. But the shadows were relentless. They enveloped him, whispering secrets of forbidden knowledge and promises of power, dragging him further into the abyss. I can picture him, a broken figure in the dim candlelight, his eyes wide with terror as he realized he had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. It was not long before the townsfolk began to notice the changes in Charles. His once bright demeanor was replaced by a haunted look, and whispers of his madness spread like wildfire. Friends who had once enjoyed his company now spoke of a darkness that surrounded him, of how he seemed to exist in a realm of shadows and dread. Then came the day when a small group of his friends, deeply worried for his well-being, decided to confront him. They approached his home with a sense of trepidation, their hearts pounding in their chests. I can feel the weight of their fear as they crossed the threshold, knowing that something was terribly wrong. What they found inside was beyond their worst nightmares. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the acrid scent of incense and something else, something foul. The shadows seemed to move of their own accord, coiling around the furniture like serpents. In the center of the room, Charles stood entranced, his eyes glazed over as he recited dark incantations that sent chills down their spines. But what truly horrified them was the grotesque figure that had risen from the darkness, a manifestation of the very forces Charles had sought to control. I can almost hear their gasps as they witnessed the creature, a twisted amalgamation of shadow and despair, its eyes burning with an unholy light. It loomed over Charles, who seemed oblivious to the terror surrounding him, lost in the throes of his madness. Desperation gripped his friends, and they attempted to pull him back from the brink. They called his name, their voices trembling with fear and urgency. But Charles, trapped in a web of his own making, was unreachable. The darkness had claimed him, and their pleas fell on deaf ears. In a final act of desperation, they tried to physically pull him away, to save him from the grasp of the creature that had ensnared him. In the end, they managed to break the spell, but not without consequences. The creature let out a deafening shriek, a sound that echoed through the very walls of the house, before vanishing into the shadows. Charles collapsed to the ground, his body limp and broken, the light in his eyes extinguished. They rushed him to a doctor, but it was too late. The darkness had seeped into his soul, leaving him a shell of his former self. The once vibrant young man was now a haunted figure, lost in a world of shadows. His friends could only watch in horror as he slipped further away, trapped in a living nightmare. Charles Dexter Ward's story serves as a reminder of the dangers that lie in the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. His tale is one steeped in fear and darkness, a tragic testament to the perils of obsession. It is a haunting reflection on the thin line between curiosity and madness, a warning to those who dare to tread too close to the shadows. As I recount this tale, I feel a shiver run down my spine. The echoes of Charles's madness linger, a chilling reminder that some secrets are best left buried, and that the darkness within us can sometimes prove more terrifying than any external monster. In the end, his quest for knowledge led not to enlightenment, but to a profound and consuming darkness, and I cannot help but wonder if, in our own lives, we might be tempted to follow a similar path into the abyss.